Okay, good day, colleagues, and welcome to the International Opening Access Week and to today's panel discussion. Colleagues, the theme for this year, Open Access Week, is It Matters How We Open Knowledge, Building Structural Equity. And our host, AfLIA, lined up two major activities that is intended to lead discussions and promote action plans needed to sustain ongoing efforts that ensure structural equity for open access across the continent. The first activity, which was held on Tuesday, the 26th of November, 2021, was a webinar which presented the survey findings on open access from the African continent. The second activity, which is an interactive panel discussion organized by the academic libraries and library consortia section on the topic, Open Access, the Global versus African Perspectives, is what we are in for today. Colleagues, Open Access is an evolving publication model that is heavily supported by organizations aiming to make scientific knowledge more accessible to a wider audience. Whether it will indeed alter scholarly communication, however, depends on researchers' underlying attitudes, motivations, and needs. However, the concept of open access can be sustained if scientists themselves regard it as a real alternative to the traditional publishing mode. Nevertheless, current research findings seem to show that a considerable share of the scientific community, especially in Africa, is not sufficiently aware of open access related initiatives and resources. Further, coupled with uncertainties about plagiarism and copyright, the main criteria for choosing a journal are its perceived reputation and impact, as well as the rigor and speed of peer review services, which reflects the traditional values grounded in the academic tenure and promotional system, where open access is not of major importance yet. Colleagues, for many more reasons, the discussion for today will delve into key and contagious issues of open access, the intricate gaps and realities of operationalizing open access in Africa, and custom some solutions that can help Africa attain the UNESCO recommendations on open science. And with me today are three panelists from diverse disciplines across Africa to discuss, deliberate, and come up with solutions. At this point, colleagues, allow me to introduce my panelists. Our first panelist, colleagues, is Ms. Joy Owango, who is the founding director of the Training Center in Communication, the first African-based training center to teach effective communication skills to scientists. She is a board member of Africa's only Preprint repository and currently sits on the steering committee of the International Science Council's steering group on the project on the future of scientific publishing. Her latest achievement in higher education and research capacity in Africa was organized by the Organization of Women in Science for the Developing World by UNESCO during the 2021 International Day for Women in Science. Welcome, Ms. Owango. Can I hear something from you? That's a hi.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction.
Thank you for coming. Ladies and colleagues, our second panelist is a medical doctor and an associate professor of clinical microbiology in the Department of Microbiology and Immunology, School of Medical Sciences at the University of Cape Coast in Ghana. She is currently Deputy Director at the Directorate of Research, Innovation and Consultancy. She is a member of the National Pediatric HIV Task Team in Ghana and an advisory board member for West African Network of Excellence for TB, AIDS, and malaria. She is also a member of the World Health Organization Guideline Development Group, for cervical cancer screening and has over 70 peer-reviewed journal publications. Colleagues, help me welcome Professor Dorcas Obriyeboah. Prof, you're welcome.
Thank you very much, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone.
Okay, colleagues, our last panelist is a deputy or college librarian of the College of Science Library, Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology in Kumasi, Ghana. He is a chartered member of the Ghana Library Association and the associate editor for the Ghana Library Journal. He is an expert on issues relating to digital libraries, data creation, digital repositories, among others, as well as open access and open data. He provides advanced training for both lecturers and students, as well as support to raise awareness of library resources. He is the country coordinator for electronic information for libraries, AfLIA, and he has recently been appointed as a member of the management committee of SPAC Africa. He has over 25 research publications to his credit. Colleagues, help me welcome the only man among my panelists today, Mr. Richard Bruce Lamptey.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Monica.
Thank you. So colleagues, at this time, I'd like to move straight to our panelists to start the discussion. Welcome once again, panelists, and I'd like to start with you by asking you to give us just an opening statement, 1 minute opening statement on the topic of discussion today. And I'd like to start with the only gentleman amongst us, Mr. Richard Lamptey. Thank you. Mr. Lamptey, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Monica. It matters how we open knowledge. Is that not the case? And so we are going to see how we can build structural equity. And that is our topic for discussion today. So I want to say that the globalization of the technological development in library and research in the 21st century through the emergence of free electronic resources, I believe was meant to improve the access to literature and then ensure a convenient, timely supply to users or for users, and to make library a growing organism for researchers and others to repeatedly accommodate the changes inherent in the use of to this technology. But I want to say that ever since the introduction of the Web Web in the early 1990s, information dissemination across the globe has become very, very, very easy. This also includes the sharing of research information by academia. Although the African continent was not left out at a later stage of the internet revolution, African position in the open access movement is considered to be highly insignificant, and with this limited research network and all that. But I believe that today we are going to learn more, discuss more, and see how best we can move the open access movement to another level, or we can reposition Africa in another. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lamptey. Can I move on to Prof? Prof, can you give us your opening statement on the topic, open access, African versus the global world? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm very happy to be part of this discussion. This is a very important topic, and it is about time that such discussions are held on the African continent. So whenever we talk about open access, it's good to remember the fact that, as the moderator mentioned in her opening remarks, that this is one of the aspects in the open science drive. So the world is going open science, and that involves a number of things, and open access is a key aspect of that. So we discussed this in the context of that drive towards open science. And I would like to quote or just mention the title of an article from one of the lecturers at the School of Medical Science here, to give us an idea how this has and is being perceived. So Dr. Evelynana Nisapon has an article that was published in 2017, and the title of the article was, "You cannot collect data using your own resources and put it on open access. Perspectives from Africa about the public health data sharing." So very interesting title. And in that paper, it gives a lot of insight into this issue of open science and the African perspective versus that of the global north. And it is a fact that this issue has been on the drawing board for a while. That is why I mentioned that this article was published in 2017. And yet we still today are discussing this. So I'm just happy to be here, and I hope that we can find some solutions to make a headway. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof, for that thought-provoking opening statement. Ms. Owango, please let's hear your opening statement. Thank you.
When we are looking, thank you so much for the introduction. When you're looking at the international theme of Open Access Week this year, it's building structural equity in open access. And also going in line with what Dr. Yeboah has said and Mr. Lamptey has also talked about. One of the things that we need to look at in Africa when you're looking at building structural equity and also opening up knowledge is how can we work together in this opportunity that has been brought to us so that we can have one voice. When you're looking at building structural equity, I look at it from an infrastructural perspective. I look at it from a sustainability perspective. And when I look at open access, I don't see, there's always the challenge of accessibility. So when you're looking at structural equity, it's also the equitable access. So when you're looking at institutions, top research producing institutions vis-a-vis smaller producing research institutions, or countries that produce the highest amount of research vis-a-vis countries that produce the lowest amount of research. How can we work together as partners, regardless of the sectors we are in, to drive open science and open access? So I keep on saying, I've been saying this the whole of this week, when you're looking at this opportunity on open science is the one chance we've been given as African researchers to use effectively so that we can use to increase our research visibility. The need for education and awareness is really important so that it is adopted by not only by researchers so that they can understand the concepts behind it, and also we are able to change that narrative that only 0.1% of Africa's research output is visible. And the reality is it's not visible because of some of the existing dynamics that make our work not accessible or visible. But with open science, this is the one time we can actually use it as a game changer in increasing the visibility of African research. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much, Owango, for that another thought-provoking opening statement. Thank you very much. Colleagues, these are the opening statements. I'll urge you to put your questions in the chat room if you have any questions. If you have any contributions, observations, kindly put them in the chat room as we go along. So, Prof, I'll start with you on the key and contagious issues of open access. You mentioned in your opening statement that from the article that lecturers or researchers cannot collect data with money and publish it for free on open access. And based on this, may I find out from you, what do you think, in your view, are some factors that could deter or motivate academics to adapt and apply the practice of open access?
Thank you very much. So the fact is, everyone or every researcher would want their output to be visible. They would want people to see what they have done. They would want people to be able to access it and use it. So this is a drive. If you truly are a researcher, you are not doing it just to put it in a box in your room. You want it out there. You want people to be able to cite your work. That you want people to be able to use your work to guide policy, to guide further research. So that is an inherent drive for any good researcher to want their work to be in an open access outlet. But of course, then comes the challenges. So we recognize we want the work there because we believe that that will give us the visibility we need, which will drive even further applications for grants. If people can know what you are doing, if you apply for a grant, you have a higher chance of getting it. So there is the positives for wanting to go open access are there. But then comes the question of how do I get into that? So you publish, you want to publish your work, and then you meet the issue of open access charges. That comes, especially if you want to use the gold open access model, then it means you, the author, needs to pay. And you need to pay so that others can then access it. That may be okay for somebody in the global north where their institution will pay anyway. The institution will pay. But here, that payment is likely to come from your pocket. It's likely to come from your salary. Even if you had some research funding, it's very likely contributions from co-authors and others. So if you are going to have to pay article processing charge to get open access, you meet that situation where you may opt for an alternative rather, which may not be open to people to get it. So in fact, the article I mentioned, in trying to assess it, I was immediately asked, then the bill came of how much I should pay for every aspect. So these are some of the issues. The charge is a key factor. Of course, I must recognize that there are drives towards trying to give waivers and others for researchers from lower and middle income countries. So that is one aspect that I realize in interacting with colleagues, that a number of people are not even aware of outlets where they can actually get these charges that scares them away actually waived off. And the process it will take to get it waived off, people do not know. So one of the hindrances is that gap in also knowledge, or should I say the information about how you can cross that charge barrier. Okay. So that is something I'll say concerning what drives us towards this and some of the challenges from our perspective.
Thank you very much, Prof. So what I take in here is funding. Thank you very much. Wango, your hand is up.
Yes, I'd like to contribute to what Dr. Obiri has said. Okay, now, one of the ways to counter that, we need to also recognize the development in the innovations and the developments that have happened in academic publishing with the rise of preprint repositories and publishing platforms. Okay, so now for those of us, since we are all in Africa, if you're a fellow or if your university is a member of the African Academy of Sciences and you're a fellow of the African Academy of Sciences, they already have a publishing platform that you can use, and they're in partnership with F1000. But you see, this one is just restricted to African Academy of Sciences fellows. So that's a very small niche. But then we have Africa Archive. It's a preprint repository where you're able to, and before you start questioning whether we are using preprint repositories or not, African researchers have already started using preprint repositories, especially those who are in the agricultural sciences and life sciences. You're using bioarchive, you're using medArchive, agri-archive, which is being pushed by CABI for those who are in the agricultural sciences. So you're already using it. So what we are saying is, in order to actually manage this challenge, and it also helps in increasing the visibility and also guides in smart journal selection strategy, start putting your manuscripts, or rather the draft of your manuscripts as you're going through your journal selection strategy process in preprint repositories. Now, the next question somebody might ask is, what about peer review? What about if somebody steals my manuscript? Preprint repositories come with DOIs, digital object identifiers. There is no way anyone is going to steal that manuscript, okay? They have no choice but to cite it because the DOI shows ownership, the first person who put it in there. So it shows ownership. So number one, your work is protected. If you have extra data, put that extra data in that same repository, and it also gets DOIs. And this is what even Africa Archive is doing. And it is free for individual researchers. So individual African researchers, I'm saying this all the way from Nairobi, please put in your manuscripts in Africa Archive as you're going, and it's free. Please note, it is free, so that you are able to start increasing your visibility. Number one, that is number one. Number two, you can have a smart journal selection strategy. As Dr. Obiri said, that there are waivers that are being provided by some of these publishers, so that you don't feel stressed to publish in the first journal that comes your way. Because once it is in the Africa Archive, what happens is that it starts collating citation and download. The world starts seeing it. And it's also going through peer review because it has a peer review community. Then once you've identified your journals, the journal, that paper will also go through peer review with the journal. So it's a win-win for African researchers. And yes, just reiterating what Dr. Obiri has said about lack of awareness, it is so unfortunate that most of us in the global south are not aware of some of the initiatives granted some of these publishers have, especially their global equity programs, whereby they are not only waivers, but free access to some of these top titles that they have. So that need, the need for education and awareness on what entails open access and how it benefits a researcher is very important. And it's also one of the things as TCC Africa, based in Nairobi, is what we are doing. We are really training researchers, research institutes, and governments to know, listen, these are some of the initiatives, please take advantage of them because it will help in increasing the visibility of your your academic community.
Thank you very much, Wango. That is so refreshing to know. So we are here, we are taking notes. We have noted that there is an organization that is doing this for Africa, and we have taken key note of that. Let's proceed. So in talking, I have realized that from the discussions, I have realized that we need funding and then we need awareness creation on some of these areas. Now, Mr. Richard Lamptey, from the librarian's perceptions, if I may ask, what are some of the motivations for supporting collaborative models for open access in the librarian's perception?
Well, for the librarian to be able to get hold of whatever is going on in the open access arena, they really have to, I believe that they really have to equip themselves with knowledge on the open access issues first. Once you're able to equip yourself of the open access issues first, and once you know that and you know how to support the researchers, I believe that whatever we can do to move the open access, take the open access movement to another level, we'll be able to do that. For instance, the issue of getting waivers for researchers is very, very important here. Many researchers, as my co-panelists mentioned, are not aware of this issue of waivers, which I think librarians are there to be able to, push for some of these things. And for now, in Africa and some of the members who are part of AfLIA has negotiated with some publishers where we can get waivers, either 50% waiver, depend on, the journal. You can get a 50% waiver or 100% waiver. Or sometimes you can, if you don't get a waiver, you can get a discount to publish. But I believe that public funded research needs to be made publicly accessible. I've listened to the two ladies. Public funded research needs to be made publicly accessible. Once researchers are given money by the taxpayer to do research, there is no need for the research, for the public to be able to have access, pay to have access to these resources. So therefore, the open access movement comes in handy here. So I would say that librarians need to just have to equip themselves with the knowledge of the open access movement, know the issues that are around, do a lot of publicity, and then we're able to reposition in the global open access movement, increasing level of awareness through enabling infrastructure, and then also enacting policies such as mandatory deposit of scholarly research or works in open access archives, and promoting some of these open access repositories that are available. I believe with that area, we can do very well as librarians.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Lamte. So librarians should act as catalysts to the open access practice and promotion across the globe. So before I take you, Ms. Owango, I would like to first of all go to Prof on this because it's very critical before coming back to you. This is what we're discussing here. So I've seen your hand up, I'll call you soon. And Prof, in the university where I come from, some time ago, now it's changing, and I know that some universities across the globe, especially in Africa, are facing this challenge. Most often when we publish in open access articles, or journals, sorry, which is perceived as predatory. Sometimes it is perceived as not being good journals. And so we would always go for those that are subscription, those that we have to pay for. What is your take on this? Has this changed? What is happening when it comes to that particular perception? Sorry.
Yes, so I would say that gradually it's changing. As people are getting knowledge on what open access actually means, then they know that it does not mean an article that is published without peer review, which is what predatory stands for. So open access and predatory are completely different principles, and people need to appreciate that. I see predatory journals rather as a threat to the open access because it made people confused into thinking that, oh, there are these journals that if you just send your article to and you pay something little or nothing, the next few weeks it will be published and out there for everybody. But that is the confusion. So over the years, there has been the need to keep educating the academic staff on what open access actually means. That is what I keep coming back to on the knowledge gap in the system in Africa. So over time, that is really changing and people are beginning to identify what predatory publication is versus what open access means. And we need to make sure that that is clear to people.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Ms. Owango, I'll come to you on this. I didn't know what question you were going to ask, but as a follow-up to what Prof has explained, what are some of the standards and qualities that we need to ensure open access publishing?
Okay, so I'll answer this and then connect to what Mr. Lamte was talking about.
In a very swift way because of time. Thank you.
Yeah. So number one, so a quick one in regards to Mr. Lamte, one of the things he was talking about is awareness in terms of repositories, but it's also the issue of the library institutions and the universities using fair principles in the libraries that they are the repositories that they're archiving the information. It's one thing to put information in a repository. It's another thing to have access to that repository. So open access doesn't mean accessibility if it is not accessible. So some of the principles I'm talking about is that repository needs to be findable. It needs to be accessible. The platform itself needs to be interoperable, and the data within needs to be reproducible as well. So these FAIR principles need to be embedded as an awareness and training for library institutions, or any institution that has a library service and a repository service. By the time it's even been indexed in a preprint repository as well. Now, in regards to predatory publishing, how do you mitigate it? Let's start with Africa. Publish in African journals that are already indexed in African journals online. They have literally broken down journals per country. So look at where are journals from Nigeria, where are the journals from Ghana? Look at what they already have indexed those journals because they go through the journal publishing and practicing standards. Get this information from, how do you mitigate this? These days, the fact that we are online, you can get good quality journals that are already indexed in the directory of open access journals. And the Director of Open Access Journals came up with a platform called Think, Check, and Submit, which helps you critique the journals that you've already identified to publish in, all right? Then the other option is, especially for the mature researchers, maybe you have a preference of working with a particular publisher, and that happens. We see this with mostly the mature researchers. They say that I only publish with Taylor and Francis or whatever the publisher's name. All these publishers today have artificial intelligence tools that can help you find journals. So they're normally called journal finders. And most of these journals that they have are already indexed in Directory of Open Access Journals, or if it is an African journal, in African Journals Online. So how do you mitigate this? For African researchers, please make an effort. Find out where are these journals indexed. The journal has to be indexed at least in a bibliographic database. If it is an African journal, in African Journals Online, or in the Directory of Open Access Journals, if you're looking at, because these are all open platforms. And if you're concerned, go through Think, Check, and Submit and critique the journals you've already identified, because it shows you a how-to guide to critique the journals to see whether it is predatory. Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Wangu, for that. Thank you. So I think we have done a lot about the key and contagious issues of open access, and I think that we should move to Africa. Now, it is well established that open access practice in Africa is different from the rest of the world, and that is what we want to talk about. So I'll start with Mr. Richard Lamptey. Do we need open access in Africa, and why? In 1 minute, do we need this?
I believe that with limited research networks, the African research landscape is accused of having been rocked by the intrusion of fast publishing and business rather than science-oriented journals. I mean, with this statement that I've made, we really need science and not business-oriented publishing. We need open access. Why? Because we are in an environment where we have limited funds and limited infrastructure, which it doesn't help us to have access to research, and therefore it limits the support doesn't come. I mean, the African researchers have limited support to the free availability of research works over the internet, and to limit restriction as much as possible on the use of resources. With this one, with statement that I'm making of information I'm giving out, I believe that we need open access because we need to stand on the shoulders of giants and then move on in any research that we do. And here is the case, we don't have money and we don't have the resources to have access to these resources. So therefore, we need open access.
Okay, thank you very much. Prof, your take on this. Does Africa really need open access?
We definitely do. What is the point in conducting research and taking the time to do a rigorous process if it's not going to be accessible, if it's not going to impact society? So research is about impact. So we need to link the issue of open access to research impact. That is why even in university rankings and others, one of the areas or how they estimate global research influence is the number of citations. But to gather citations, people must see the work, be able to read the details, and then apply it. So yes, no doubt about that, we do need open access.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. So Mr. Wangu, Prof and Mr. Richard Lamptey are saying that we need open access in Africa, and I believe you agree, unless you don't agree. So if you agree—
Oh, yes, I agree.
Yes. So I'd like to ask you this. If you agree, what do you think, or let me put it this way, do you think as Africans, we have a uniform understanding of what open access is? Since I think and I believe that anything short of this may hinder open access practices in Africa. Do we have a uniform understanding like the global world or the developed world on open access? We need it.
Unfortunately, we do not. Okay, there's even within. Let's start from a Pan-African perspective and look at a country that produces the most research in Africa, that is South Africa. They have a better understanding on open access simply because, let's start from their historical aspect of South Africa, because they've got a much more mature higher education and research community as the rest of, and when I say mature, it's in terms of policies supporting higher education and research and investment in research as compared to most countries in Africa. And even within South Africa, there's still that stratification. The top research institutions, the big five, have a good understanding of what open access is, but the smaller institutions do not have a good understanding of it. Why? Because of limited access to resources. When I say resources, and this now cuts across the continent, it's not necessarily money, okay? It's the resources that support the research life cycle. Okay, whether it's infrastructure, whether it is network, whether it is now literature resources in this case, or even now when we narrow, even look at funding, countries have different access to some of this information. And the result is you will find that literally in all these African countries, the top research producing institutions within those countries have a better understanding of open access and open science than the smaller research institutions. Sometimes, what I noted is that sometimes researchers have a pushback on accepting open access. And this is something Dr. Obiri also noted. And it's something that you're seeing where the researchers are questioning they have a pushback towards open access because the mandates from their respective governments have not yet accommodated open access, and they want you to publish in particular journals in order to get promoted. You need to publish in particular journals in order to either get funding or to publish in particular journals in order to graduate. All right. And some of these open access journals might not have a high impact in terms of if you're looking at the calculation of the impact factor as compared to the subscription-based journals. Okay. So the understanding of open access is there's a dichotomy. The dichotomy is based on the top research producing institutions have a very good understanding of it. The lower tier institutions are struggling to understand it, but I believe with continuous education and awareness on this will help democratize the higher education sector in making people understand what entails open access, the systems that exist to support them, and also with collaboration, which Richard was saying. So you're looking at library consortia working with research councils, granting councils, working with university commissions. When you all have one voice, you end up supporting the entire academic community in your respective countries. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. So colleagues, we are still discussing open access, the global and African perspective. And we are discussing the intricate gaps and realities of operationalizing open access in Africa. And we have had several submissions on the views of Africans on open access. Prof, how can Africa therefore maximize contribution to open access publications? Any ideas?
So first, I would come back to what has been raised a number of times, that we need that education. People need to really know what is available, what it means, what resources are available to them, and what they can do to access those resources. So that awareness creation for me is very key. It's one of the things that at the Directorate of Research, Innovation and Consultancy at UCC, we are always doing, because you realize that people still do not know that yes, they can find easy, or there are ways to get your work into open access, very good journals, and not cost you money. That awareness needs to be key. The second issue I will raise is that yes, whenever we talk about the infrastructure for open access, I am yet, and I can be corrected, I'm yet to find a document that has really done a proper needs assessment and look with a focus purely on Africa to see what is the reality, what is the situation, what do people need, what is required. I'm yet to see such a comprehensive document so that based on that, recommendations and interventions that come up will be things that are tailored towards Africa. So I think that that would be a very good start. And organizations involved in supporting Africa towards the open access drive need to really look at this and see how we work together to find African solutions to this African problem based on evidence gathered here.
Thank you very much, Prof. You have actually asked my next question and answered it in this question. So I'm not going to ask that again, but we have a question before we move on to the last segment. We have a question from, I think, Paco, and he is asking, how successful is open access in the context of Pan-Africanism compared to the rest of the world? I think that this has been answered by Owango. So Patrick, thank you for this. I think maybe the question came in earlier on, which we didn't see. I have another one. I don't know if it's a question. Sarat says, the Mango Journal Index, especially the category of OAJs, gives away the misconceptions surrounding OAJs as predatory. That is, open access journals as predatory. It is exciting to see open access journals in Q1 journal rankings. Okay, so I think he's trying to give us some sort of information. Thank you very much. So colleagues, we are still discussing this issue. I can see Mr. Richard Lamte, you have your hand up. Do you want to make any contributions to this before we move on?
Yes, Joy, I think Aubrey, Dorcas was talking about the institution as in what is happening in UCC, but I believe that African governments have a role to play by supporting African universities and research institutions to gain access to open access resources. I believe that this will enhance the wide publicity of open access resources. And I believe that it can also encourage the open access movement by stepping up financial support for higher education institutions, thereby setting up policies for higher education system that will encourage, I believe, dissemination of research information through open access media, and also to ensure that public investment in higher education make a useful and cost-effective contribution to socio-economic development. And they can also support through policy making and adopt licensing framework to support university-wide awareness raising programs on the open access movement. So we can go on and on and on, and then give a lot of suggestions. But if the government doesn't see some of these things very important, I believe that it will not really support it. So that's my little contribution to.
Thank you very much, Mr. Richard Lamte. I can see Ms. Owango's hand up. Please keep the hand up for me. I will come back to you very shortly because of time. We are running out of time, and we will have to come out with solutions that can help Africa attain the UNESCO recommendation. So, colleagues, at the 40th section of the UNESCO's General Conference, about 193 member states were tasked with the development of an international standard setting instrument on open science in the form of a UNESCO recommendation. Now, other researchers have come up to indicate that this particular recommendation is very general. We want to find out how Africa fits in. So colleagues, we are going to concentrate on this now. Ms. Owango, please, do you have, what were you go? You are free to go if you can do this within 30 seconds.
Okay, yeah. So just to reiterate what Richard was saying is that governments have started investing in pushing for open access and open science. Ghana, I believe, Richard, you're in Ghana. Ghana is actually one of those countries, because what happened is that countries that committed to spending at least 1% of their GDP in higher education and research created science granting councils. And these science granting councils and their initiatives are pushing for open science. So they actually now, we're in a situation whereby the narrative is slowly changing, whereby we have government stakeholders now pushing for investment in and support for open science and open access as well. So the narrative is changing. So I just wanted to let you know. And so far we have about 15 countries that have committed. So Ghana is one of them. And if there's anyone from Nigeria, Nigeria is one of them, and Kenya is also one of them. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Ms. Owango, for that useful and timely information. I'm happy Ghana is one of them. Okay, so as I was saying, the concept of open access as conceived by UNESCO and its stakeholders is a good idea that should contribute immensely to human development. But Prof, how does the UNESCO draft recommendation affect African creators, scholars, and publishing industries in Africa? What is your take on this? How does it affect us? Should we accept it?
So it's always interesting how it's easy to draft recommendations and put it across and hope that people will be able to fit in. And so this recommendation, I must say, is a very good drive towards open science. So that is great. But how does it impact Africa? You will see that it comes back to one of the points I raised earlier, that I have not seen the evidence from a needs assessment or a SWOT analysis done on Africa that informed the recommendations. So if you take what you find in the global north and hope that it will fit our situation, the peculiarities here would impact how much we would be able to do as far as your recommendation is concerned. And this applies to all recommendations that are made for people to follow. So that is one issue that I see and a number of people have raised with the UNESCO recommendations. The fact that we don't have evidence from Africa informing the interventions or recommendations. The other issue here is also, I have mentioned it, research funding. The funding mechanism in Africa is completely different than research funding mechanism for them out there. So you just assume that researchers in Africa would also have money and do the research and therefore should publish in open access. But you have not addressed the fundamental issue of the funding, the source of funding for the research. So that is one of the drawbacks from the recommendations, that it needs to address Africa's specific issues. So I think basically that is the point, that yes, they are generally good, but if Africa were to take them as it is, carte blanche, and use, then it would negatively, or might, let me use the word, might negatively impact our ability to actually fulfill those recommendations.
Thank you very much, Prof. Mr. Richard Lamptey, I believe, do you agree with Prof? Let me ask this first. Do you agree with Prof's submission that we shouldn't generalize the recommendations, but look at the African perception or perspectives before we can generalize what we have found from UNESCO to Africa?
I totally agree, because African perception and perspective and issues are totally different. Okay. And I believe that for Africa, South Africa is trying to do their best and to try to see how best they can meet the needs of African things that the Europeans are talking about. That doesn't relate to European Africans, but rather try to do more like the custom-made solutions for Africa. That is why how come Africans, we can get things like waivers, but Europeans don't get access to waivers. In Africa, there may be things like incentives that need to be put in place for researchers to be able to have access to, publish in open access or be open access compliant in everything that they, or to be open access compliant in everything that they do in terms of research work. So I believe that there are quite a lot of things that may not relate to them, even if they go specific, they may not be related to Africa. So we may, Africans themselves or ourselves, we need to find a way of coming up with recommendations that suit us so that we can move forward with it. Or else if you have to go for the general, always the Europeans are always taking over in some of these things. So the African person or the African should be able to sit down and then come up with a good recommendation that will suit us and that will make our open access.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So before I go to Owango, that's the last round for this, and that will be maybe the last set of questions. You have recommended that Africans should have our own recommendations. based on the general recommendations from UNESCO. Now, as panelists, we are all Africans. Could you give us briefly 4 each, straight to the point, 4 recommendations based on the UNESCO recommendation, 4 that we can adapt as Africans to attain the UNESCO recommendations? So I will start with Prof, you again. Briefly, 4, just list them, no explanations, just tell us so that we use it and give it to AfLIA to move along with as an action point. So 4, please go, Prof.
Let's push our governments to increase research funding in Africa. Institutions of higher learning should also invest more into research incentives for their staff. These institutions should look at awareness creation, education for people in Africa about the open access or open science issues. The libraries across should be empowered to be sources of information on what is available, what can be accessed by people in Africa, and they should make this information readily out there for researchers.
Thank you very much, Prof. So, Prof has mentioned government support, institutional support, awareness creation, and libraries acting as catalysts. And Ms. Owanyo, your 4 points, please.
Okay, we need to look at the diversity and the language which is conveniently ignored when it comes to the research output coming out of the continent. So basically, what I'm looking at is countries whose indigenous language is the national language, and they also do research in those languages. We need to look at how the recommendations, how on our part we can work with translation services or partners who can translate that work so that that work is also visible, because language is still, science is still seen as a language, English is still seen as a language of science. Then we need to invest in infrastructural systems. Okay, if we are to have good open access, good support in open access, we need to invest in infrastructural systems that can support this process. And just to throw a spanner in the works, why can't we do something from the African Union? Then it is made to suit, you know, it's part of Agenda 2063, the Africa we want. What do we want as Africans when it comes to open science and open access? Why can't it come from the African Union and we present that to UNESCO? This is what Africa wants. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. So we have noted that diversity in languages, invest in infrastructure, and then why don't we work this through the African Union, then to UNESCO? Thank you very much, Ms. Owanyo. Mr. Richard Lamptey, your 4 points, please.
I believe they've said quite a lot of things, but let me also add some few things. Definitely the increasing level of awareness is very, very important here. And then the issue of enabling infrastructure, which our sister has also mentioned. Okay. Then enacting policies such as mandatory deposit of scholarly works in open access archives is very imperative. And then the issue of the intensification of research networks could support the process of access and use of open access resources. And I believe that governments have a role to play by supporting African universities and research institutions to foot the cost of publicizing their works on the digital landscape. I believe very, very importantly.
Okay, thank you very much, panelists. Thank you, colleagues. We have really deliberated on the issues, and let me reiterate that some of the solutions which we will be taking to AfLIA as action point for Africa to be well vested in the open access environment is to have our government support, as our panelists have mentioned. We need institutions to have to also support our researchers to be able to invest in their research, etc. We need awareness creation. That is one critical issue that has come up in this research. We need to also empower our librarians, and I like this very well because the librarians are the catalysts. They need to know what is going on to be able to take up this knowledge to others as well. And then one good point was diversity in language. We would consult Ms. Owanyo on this later on to see how we can elaborate on it. And then invest in infrastructure systems, working through the African Union to UNESCO rather than UNESCO to the whole of the world and Africa inclusive, so that we would be able to come up with what works for Africa, for us and for us as Africans. And to be able to enact policies and intensify the research network. These are solutions to open access that has come up. Thank you very much, my panelists. Because of time, I would have loved to give you 1 minute each to give me your closing remarks, but let me make it 20 seconds. So closing remarks from you. Ms. Owanyo, give me your closing remarks in 20 seconds, please.
Okay. In order for us, first of all, we need to look at open science as an opportunity to help increase the research visibility coming out of the continent. And in order for us to achieve this, we need to work together. It's not a library affair, it is a higher education and research community affair. So we need to work together, whether it's research councils, granting councils, library associations. We need to work together in order to achieve this objective of equitable access to open access.
Oh, thank you very much. I believe there are some questions in the Q&A, but as I'm looking at it, Prof, please give us your closing remarks when I'll look at the questions still.
Open science has come to stay. It is the way to go. We need to work together. We need to make sure that we as individuals, as institutions, as countries, as a continent, we do what we can to build the infrastructure and move along with this drive.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Richard Lamte, sorry, yours is not going to be an open remark. Your closing remark, is going to be to answer a question which I just saw from the Q&A, and it says, how are the researchers receiving the use of institutional repositories in Africa? Sorry for this one. I think that we would, Mr. Richard, would you like to take that?
Well, yes. I mean, I believe that they're receiving it well. For institutions that I believe that many of the researchers, because of visibility, because of citation, because of the H-index that institutions use to assess them, they prefer to, after publishing their papers, they want to deposit or archive their papers in the repository. So I believe the repositories in Africa, I mean, some few ones that I know in other institutions are receiving very high, I don't know what word to use, but I think it's a very good platform that researchers are really showcasing their research output. It's all. I believe researchers will accept it only if librarians are to do proper advocacy, proper awareness creation, the benefits that they intend having and all that, and then even institutions coming up with policies. So, for instance, as an institution that I know in Ghana, they have come up with a policy where any lecturer or any researcher applying for promotion, you are supposed to submit your document in the repository. So I believe with all these things, definitely things can get better. And I mean, for that question, I think researchers have received repositories as good.
Thank you very much, Mr. Richard Lamte. Prof, sorry for calling you back. There's a question. Looking at, the question says, looking at call for more open access, does it have any detrimental effect on educational policies on Africa from the West? Would you like to take this?
Not that I can see, not that I can see. So this is more, any impact I can think of is positive. If I want to think of any potential negative impact, is the issue of confusing it with predatory and therefore maybe driving some people there. But in terms of detrimental effect on policy in Africa, education, not really. No, I don't think, unless someone has something.
Okay, thank you very much. Colleagues, we are coming to almost the end of this panel discussion, and I know it has been very fruitful and thought-provoking. But before I give the closing remarks, I would like us to have a brief word from the chair of the academic libraries, the library consortia section for AfLIA, in the person of Dr. Mark Anthony Kobler. Doc, if you're here, can we have your
Thank you very much. Monica, can you hear me?
Yes, please, we can hear you.
You have done a great job this afternoon. And on behalf of the Africa Academic Libraries and Library Consortia section, I want to thank the panelists for accepting to participate in this important program. It has been a very informing and exciting discussion. And I know the discussion will continue after this. It's not the end of it. We need to continue the discussion. Open access has come to stay, and there's nothing we can do about it. We have to embrace it as researchers, as librarians, as publishers, and we have to look at the issues that pertain to our African continent. And let us not only be at the receiving end, we also have to give up to the world. I'm looking forward to more collaboration, more networking, more discussion on this issue. And I hope that the session will line up programs in the future that will deal with some other aspect of this topic. I want to thank the panelists for accepting once again to participate in this important program, and also thank the moderator, Dr. Monica Mensah. She was just excellent. I really admire your moderation, and thank you all for participation. And I hand over to you, Monica.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mark Anthony Copeland, for that submission. And colleagues, at this time, I would like to say a very big thank you to my panelists. Ms. Joy Owango, thank you very much for coming and for sharing your thoughts.
Thank you.
Mr. Richard Bruce Lamte, thank you very much. And Prof, thank you so much for coming. We thank all of you. And colleagues, we thank you for participating in this all-important discussion. I have some announcements to make. The first announcement is that kindly note that this session will be uploaded on the AfLIA YouTube channel. So if you want to listen to it later on, you can go to the AfLIA YouTube channel and you can have the whole section to listen to once again. Colleagues, I encourage you and your institutions that are not yet members of AfLIA to contact AfLIA membership officer whose details appear on the AfLIA website to register. And that said, I would want to, on behalf of AfLIA and my panelists and myself, wish every one of us the best of the day and to say bye-bye. Thank you for coming. Bye-bye.
Right. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, panelists. AfLIA is grateful. Have a great day. Bye-bye.